hear myself through my headphones. Yes, man. Like, I feel real good about this right now.
Pay attention, because you are now listening to Permission to Speak Freely.
Before we get started, I got to shout out somebody. I got to say something about somebody. I'm trying to pull up my words just to make sure that I got it right. I'm going to just read a post that I wrote. Got the word yesterday that an old friend of mine passed away. There was a time when I looked at him like my younger brother. Always had true love, respect, and admiration for this guy. One of the things about serving in the Navy that has always been unique is the number of people you meet and build strong bonds with that you just separate from after a tour and potentially never see again. Unless it's a ceremony or reunion or you find yourself stationed again in the same location. There are some friends that you keep up with forever, but I can assure you I've bonded with way more people than I've been able to keep up with. Social media has kept us kind of connected in a sense. I say in a sense because I really thought keeping up with Facebook posts and updates would be enough for me. It wasn't. I knew my boy knew what I was doing from likes or comments, and I thought I knew what he was going through by checking his posts. In hindsight, I wish I had reached out more on a personal level. To all my friends and family on here that I do not speak with every day, please know that I love you. And just as I love you just as I did the last day I saw you. I feel the same way about you on the best day. I feel the same way about you that I felt on the best day that we had together. My number hasn't changed, though I may need to use it a little more. It also feels good knowing that I could call some of you out the blue. And it's like we never had a break in communications at all. To save myself and you from the longest post ever, I just want to say, please don't take your friends, family, or yourself for granted. We are not here forever. Let's make sure the people that we love know we love them. I love you. Rest well to the brother, my mentee, Clayton Traywick. So let's get started. I had to start that off on a sad note. Sorry about that.
No, man, first of all, it's real, man. I think, I don't know what happened, but definitely over the last year, I feel like I've lost quite a few people, a lot of military members, sadly, some due to mental health issues and stuff. And so, it's always important to kind of get refocused, get resettled, and I actually just appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It kind of stuck out, man, because I'm like, man, this is my boy. He had cancer. And I'm like keeping up with his, I saw he posted about it before. So I'm like, I know he got it, but I never like reached out. I'm kind of just keeping up with him through Facebook and thinking that that's keeping up with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then now that I can't ever reach out to him again, it's like, damn, that like, I wish I would have done, something else. But we got so many friends like that in the military that we have these connections with that, we think we try our best to keep up with, but life happens. We got families, we got stuff like that. And we kind of take some of those relationships for granted. So that hit me hard. It hit me yesterday, man. I actually shed a couple tears, this morning. From like, it happened yesterday. Like I found out about it yesterday, but I shed a couple tears this morning. This was like, man, like a really good like person in my life, man. So, that kind of hit hard. But hey, for the listeners, right, this is a special moment for us as well. Coming off our anniversary, our 4-year anniversary, we get the pleasure of sitting down talking to Mike Steadman, Iron Mike. The coolest thing about all of this is that he was one of the first podcasters to talk to us. When we first started our pod, I don't even know if we was 10 episodes deep. So I got a little rundown. And Mike, please help me. But you got a lot of stuff here, man. So, but I'm going to run it down, kind of the way I saw it. A 3-time National Collegiate Boxing Champion. I definitely want to talk about some of that too. And that's United States Naval Academy, graduated class of 2010. Marine Corps Infantry Officer with deployments to Afghanistan, Japan, and the Philippines. Author of the Black Veteran Entrepreneur book that, if y'all remember, we had Alana Abernathy on here. She was co-author. It says vocal advocate for veterans, champion for youth, host of various podcasts. I wrote media trailblazer on here. And probably so much more, man. I mean, like, I think every year you add another thing to your list. And my first question is why? Why you stay busy like that?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I was actually reflecting on this earlier. So, I grew up single parent home, East Texas, right? Had a chance to go to the Naval Academy, fell in love with the sport of boxing. And then that just instantly became my passion because I was exposed to it. I was good at it, right? And so when I was getting out of the military after the Marine Corps, I just wanted to do boxing. That's all I wanted to do. But then just like in life, man, you go through these journeys and you start to get exposed to other things, And I think I'm just like a natural curious person. Like I wanted to become a podcaster because I saw somebody else being a podcaster and I was like, oh, that's dope. And that identity is what I sought, right? Like to be a podcaster. And then the same thing, right? Like I read a book. It was really impactful for me early on in my entrepreneurial journey. It was Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Yep.
And I was like, yo, I want to be like that, So I sought to be an author. And so just over the years, I've just kind of evolved. And honestly, it's just through experiences and exposures. And then sometimes I think, and I was reflecting on this of, you just kind of have seasons in life. You know what I mean? Like I'm good at boxing. I'm a great boxing coach. I started a boxing brand, a gym in Newark, right? And I've been doing it for so long, but there's other aspects of life that I want to experience now. Like I've been in the boxing gym for like 10 years and stuff like that. I've written a book, I've gotten into business coaching. I just got back from Nepal. I trekked up to Everest Base Camp. And I mean, I was like, me and my lady were like the only black people out there, bro. We didn't see no black people, none, nada. Yeah. I take that back. We saw one black person. He was looking at us like, what y'all out here for? And we looked at him like, what you out,
Yeah.
But we passed each other on the trail. We fist bumped and we're just like, boom.
Yep.
But we didn't say nothing. We just looked at each other like, I see you. I don't know why you here. I know why I'm here. But, just kind of having that. And so like, as I get more experiences, I'm opening up myself to new opportunities and not limiting myself and allowing myself to just fit inside a box.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask what would be a last question first. This would be like a last question, but just coming off of what you was just saying, I'm asking now. So do you believe in like a singular purpose in life?
I used to. I think when I was first coming out, right? Like I was definitely like, I felt very blessed, right? Because like, to be honest, I didn't really have an issue transitioning out of the military per se. Because I started my transition like a year and a half early, probably like 3 years early. Like after Afghanistan, I was like, I went to Afghanistan in 2012. I was like, I knew that like, I did not want this to be my legacy. Like I didn't want to I want to be so much more than just be remembered as this like infantry officer. And God forbid something happens to you in battle, right? And so I was mentally, I was just thinking about like, okay, what other impact do I want to have, whatever. And when I transitioned out, I was so focused. I had this passion for boxing, and I just felt very blessed because I know a lot of people struggle with the passion. But I will say, like, after doing it for 10 years and you start to explore, other things, right? Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, going back to what I was talking about before, like, what can I become?
Yeah.
I probably didn't answer your question because I lost my train of thought for a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
No, I'm not. I'm actually not. You know what I mean? Because actually not. Because I think this is a good conversation anyway and how it's flowing. So, like, what do you want your legacy to be?
Honestly, it's kind of selfish, man. I just want to enjoy each and every day, bro. Because I lost, like I talked about, after you opened up about, sadly, your friend passed away from cancer. We had 2 young African-American Naval Academy graduates, right, pass away. One was my frat brother. He's a naval officer, submarine officer, right? And he committed suicide last summer. And so it was 2023. And then shortly after that, I had a mentee of mine that just tragically passed away as well. Both young guys. I'm talking about they graduated at the Naval Academy in like 2019, 2022, just young guys. And so when that happened, all of a sudden it kind of puts a lens on your life. Like, what if we don't have as much time as we kind of thought we had? And all those things that we said we wanted to do, and et cetera, et cetera. And like, we'll talk about entrepreneurship and, this podcast, like where y'all have taken it from, like that's entrepreneurship. People don't see the behind the scenes, the grind, the yada, 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 but just understand like there's also trade-offs because while you're grinding, in the hustle, sometimes you don't really look up and then you look up and you're like, damn, like 2 years have passed or like 3 years have passed or whatever. I think so for me, my legacy is just really about just staying true, to myself. And really just trying to have a coaching client that loves to say, suck the bone marrow out of life.
Yeah.
So just trying to give myself the imagination of like what's possible. Because, when you're younger, we can say whatever. You can say you want to be president. You can do whatever. But then you get older and all of a sudden people try to, try to tell you to like grow up.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yo, you just gave me a really good perspective. It's probably one I had, but you just like kind of reinvigorated for me, because a lot of times we do have all of these plans, all these goals, and all these things we want to do in life, and then like you don't really want to end up with regrets. Like I don't want to be like 70. Like I never like. It's two places I want to go in the country, right? And I'll go, but I haven't been to Atlanta yet, and I haven't been to New Orleans yet. You know what I mean? I don't want to be 77, like, damn, I still haven't been to Atlanta or New Orleans, and not thinking about, the fact that I've been to Singapore, or that, I've lived in San Diego, Washington, D.C., like that I've been all these other places, just not Atlanta or New Orleans. And there's really nothing stopping me from going. So like you said, man, we really do got to kind of appreciate the moments that we had and not think it's always more, that it's a big ass world and it's a very short life. So there's always more that you can do. You know what I mean? So thank you. I appreciate that perspective. I got a question for you, man. So what's your confession? So hey, before I get here, right, I want to tell the listeners where this comes from, right? So Mike's podcast is called Confessions of a Native Son. And that was it. You still got it up, right? It's still like if somebody go to it,
it's still up there. The feed is still up there. Yeah.
Yeah. You just haven't put an episode out in a while, but it's called Confessions of a Native Son. And one of the first things that, he get his guests to do when they come on is he get them to give a confession. You know what I mean? So I think when we came on, we gave them on your episode. I believe you gave one too. But I want to ask you now in 2024, can you give me a confession?
Man, that's a great question. And I appreciate you for asking this, because it's been so long since I've done one of these. But I got a couple confessions for you. And it's funny because when you all reached out to me, I forgot that you had, you were on my podcast. I thought I was already on here, but I was like, they got this admin that was getting it. Right. And I was like, what do they want me to talk about? Because it's been a minute. I didn't think, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But I think my confession is a couple of things. This is really just on my heart, right? So we can spar around this. But one confession I have is, I'm really struggling these days thinking about whether or not recruiting people to the military, because I'm just seeing so many people struggle on the outside. I just see so much stuff just in terms of like, you always assume because somebody goes to the Naval Academy or they're an officer or whatever, right, that they got life figured out, that they got the golden ticket and all this other stuff. But I'm really worried about like the future of work for people transitioning out of the military or just people in general, and just having to stay up and compete in this kind of job market and tech and all that other stuff. So, I'm just being honest with that. And, it's interesting because you see so many people talking about like the recruiting problem we have in this country. Yeah. And I'm very patriotic, right? Like I serve my country. I got an inner city boxing gym, right? I'm not overly aggressive with the recruiting kids, but if they ask me, I tell them. But just by natural, I guess a lot of kids just end up going in the military anyway because I inspire them. But I just, I do think about that now, just kind of like, the number of veterans are dwindling, and they're looking for current veterans to, kind of help recruit and whatever. But the reality of like what's awaiting a lot of service members as they transition, it does worry me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about when they transition from the service back to civilian world, right?
Yeah.
How hard is it out there?
I mean, for like, that's a good question.
Tisha just transitioned too, so.
Yeah. It is, the hard part is like when you're in the service, right? Like you don't really have to worry about, you get paid on the 1st and 15th for the most part. You got good medical, you got GI Bill, you got all these different things, right? And when you go to like a place like the Naval Academy, everywhere you go, people like to say, you're the best America has to offer, right? And people really believe that. But then, you got people that are going to college like you, but they might have to work 3 jobs to pay for their schooling, So their grades might suffer a little bit, but let's say they're a killer. They're working like 3-4 jobs. You're going to school full time on the military's dime, you know, and now you're competing against that person in the job market. And that person been hitting the ground running since they were like 22. You know, the minute they graduated, now you're like a service member and you're transitioning. And so, you know, how do we compete? You know, how do we stay competitive? And like you see a lot of programs talking about like veteran hiring and veterans are the best and yada, yada, yada. But on the flip side is like, if you would have told me when I was going to the Naval Academy that like Naval Academy grads would be committing suicide out here and having trouble getting jobs and getting laid off and et cetera, like I just was not exposed to that in my younger days. But now as I'm getting older, I'm starting to see that stuff again. Yeah. And you're just trying to figure out like, okay, like what is the common denominator here? Sorry to hit y'all with this. I know it's a very pro-patriotic podcast, but like, you know, it's just a thing that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of, so basically it's like, hey, we putting people in the military and we giving them like this false and you reworded it, like a false sense of security. And then they coming out of it to the grind of like the grind, bro. The Hunger Games type grind, with people that been in this grind for forever. So we might not be outfitted to be in this grind like that. Because I mean, anything we want is kind of at our disposal, right? If we want some financial counseling, that's free. If we want any like everything is free. Money man, like career stuff is free. We could get real estate kind of training for free. Our medical is free, our dental is free, flu shots free. Like everything we get is free. Is flu shot our flu shots free for everybody? Or am I tripping?
I don't know. Oh no, see, we don't even know. We don't even know.
Yeah, but like everything is free. You have a baby, it's all free. You don't even think about the cost of everything. So then you come out to the real world against people like I see. And it's funny because I was talking to my mom just the other day, and she was telling me about somebody who needed to go get food stamps. She's like, yeah, such and such. You know, just talking to your mom on the phone. Yeah, such and such need to go get some food stamps. Business. And I said, well, like, what's the prerequisite, you know, to getting food stamps? And she was like, you ain't got enough money for food. You need food. That's the prerequisite. I'm like, that's the only prerequisite.
Let me tell y'all, right? About 3 years ago, I was at a military startup conference, right? It's in Palo Alto Bay Area. You got like all these venture capitalists there, entrepreneurs and stuff, et cetera, right? And I'm there talking to like a bunch of veterans, you know, and I meet this lieutenant colonel in the Air Force who's getting ready to get out, right? Yeah. Or he just transitioned or whatever. And I was just joking. I was like, come on in, the water's fine. You can drive Uber, work at Qdoba, you know, whatever. And he looks at me and he goes, I already drive Uber. And I was like, dang. And then I saw, you know, there's another guy in the circle with us. He's like, I drive Uber too. And I was like, just put my foot in my mouth. I was like, you know? But like, you know, people out here driving Teslas, you know, you get picked up. I live in New York City now. I moved to Harlem, but, you know, I'm seeing people, you know, driving Teslas, really nice cars, driving Uber, just because the change in the market, right? Like people get let go and all that other stuff. And so I just worry about that because you got to fight every day. You know, you got to stay on. And that's not even including the personal life stuff, you know, people going through divorces, right? Dealing with deaths, everything. Bro, the world don't feel sorry for you.
Yeah,
right. And you know, it's a big difference between being in the Navy or being in the military in general, because you can keep your job being a mediocre worker. Not in the civilian force. Like you will get cut real quick.
The Uber thing hit me a little bit because I mean, between mortgage and so I live in and I hate to be this open about it, but I will for a second. I live close to DC and I work in Annapolis, and my daughter goes to daycare in DC, and that's a personal choice. But between daycare and mortgage, that's like $7,000 a month between daycare and mortgage. Probably a little bit under if that. So that's like $7,000 for me and my wife a month. I'm not getting paid that much more than that a month. You know what I mean? So, you know, and she's not either. So like you know, that's already, and that's just daycare and mortgage. That's not no other bills. Right. All these streaming services and like all this stuff, you know, some of the stuff we overindulge in and stuff like that too. But just those two things alone is like $7,000. You know? So, and I can't imagine somebody being able to do that without what we have. She got a master's degree. She got her job here. I've been in the military for 17 years and some change. So I got that kind of equity there. But yeah, you're right, man.
Yeah, they don't got the TRICARE,
Right.
They're paying for tuition out of pocket, eating them up, right? So,
Right.
It's just real.
Yeah,
Right.
man. And I hate to drag it, but I used to, even when I was younger, man, and I used to look at like family members or friends who seemed like they wasn't progressing, and I'd be a little judgmental, like, man, like you in the same spot, or you keep trying things, ain't shit shaking for you and all that. And my brother told me recently, and it was a rough conversation, but he was like, yo, you pretty much like you living, I don't even want to get into it because it's too dark for me, but it was pretty much I'm living a cushioned life because the government gave me the cushion. Like that's what he said.
Yeah.
That was his perspective of the life I live. Like I didn't earn this shit. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was his perspective. He
Wow.
told me that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that's like, it gives a lot to what you're saying. It kind of unveils that to me a little bit for what some people might be thinking about us out there too.
Yeah. And it's not knocking. I think that sometimes like we get so offended on this stuff, but people have to recognize people are coming from their perspectives, and it's like the person that, is working 12 hours at, Qdoba, you don't think they're working hard,
Right.
in the main, the Times Square, getting slayed, right? People coming in and out all day, but they just got a little bit of different situation. And the fact of the matter is, like, when you do have those government jobs, you are in the military, you do have a certain level of protection. You don't show up to work on Monday, people come and looking for you, whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
Civilian world, you don't show up to Monday, it's a wrap.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is the hiring process for vets.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole mental, like I've been an entrepreneur. I've been self-employed since 2018. I have never applied for a job. The one job I had getting out of the military, working at a private school, St. Benedict's Prep, that was just a handshake. I called up the headmaster, and I had a little clout, I had a little leverage, being African-American Naval Academy grad, moving to Newark, New Jersey. I had ties to the school. So I've always been able to kind of just make it work, right? But I remember that conversation. He's like, yeah, we got to pay you. Like, what are your thoughts? And I was like, oh, at the time, I was like, well, I remember being pretty comfortable as a first lieutenant. I just want to make that. And they were like, what was that? I was like, I think it was like 65, something, right? But like, negotiating those things, the stock, right? Like, and that was a school. So it's not like a tech startup or some of these businesses, but there's just a lot to life that just you're just protected from. And when you transition out, man, I feel for people that are applying for jobs, they're not hearing back, or they have a job and they lose the job and now they got to apply for another job. But that 3-month, that 6-month waiting period, just to find out you didn't get it. And then this stuff extends. Right. And so like that starts eating away people's personal cash flow and all that other stuff. So we can't pretend like that stuff is not out there.
Yeah. I remember my very first job interview after I got out. I only did like 3 interviews, really 2 interviews. And it was so nerve-wracking. I got off like and it was virtual, but after I hung up, I was like, ain't no way I got a job.
Yeah.
ain't no way I got that job. Like it was just so different, everything from like just creating the resume. I went to a resume class while in the Navy, through Fleet and Family. But still like having to go and do an interview. I tried to treat that shit like a Sailor quarter board. I had no clue what the hell I was doing. I watched a couple YouTube videos trying to, figure out what do I need to do and how I need to answer questions and stuff like that. So it was just a very different world. I realized then like, oh, this is a whole nother world. And the anxiety of, okay, if I don't find a job, like eventually, my military paycheck is going to run out. And thankfully I had retirement, but that ain't your full military paycheck. And then, how long is it going to take? Is it going to be delayed? Is my VA disability going to be delayed? So I just went into like this, like, man, like I was so worried of what life is going to look like on the other side.
Yeah, 100%. And then think about if you're a vet and you transition out and you go back home, a lot of enlisted personnel tend to just go back home, especially the young enlisted. Who are you talking to about this stuff?
Right.
You know, your homeboys that's already back in town, whatever. You know, you're this big bad dude. They see you on the Instagram. You know, you got the car. You doing your thing. Now you're coming back, staying with your moms. Mm-hmm. You know, can't get a job. God forbid you don't use your GI Bill.
Right.
You know, if you don't use your GI Bill, you better be freaking a savant or something. You know, you better be, you know, what's it called? Goodwill hunting. Get the books out at the library, just motivated. And so, you know, again, this is just kind of my perspective. And I think it ties into kind of what I do now around being an entrepreneur. Because I do think the future of work is like bootstrapped. I do think entrepreneurship is a skill set. You know, just everyone should learn just how to generate income for themselves and their loved ones at a moment's notice. You know, I had a coaching client today. And, you know, one of the things we were talking about was, you know, a client owed her money, like hadn't paid the invoice. She was asking me like what to do about it. And honestly, I was like, let's just eat it, you know, because it ain't worth your energy. That energy we're dedicating to chasing this down by this person that's not doing right by you in the first place. That's energy we need to focus elsewhere. And I was like, if you put your head down, you can make that up. And so I just think part of, you know, again, entrepreneurship is like the earning the craft. So like if you do have that gap in cash flow, you know, where you got 3 to 6 months, right? Whether it's driving Uber or something. I'm not knocking the Ubers. I'm just putting that out there just to get people perspective, right? Like just being able to go out and like actually make money in a legit, legal way, you know? And I do think that's a good skill set to have.
Yeah, that's that Sonny the Kadojiro talk where it's like, hey, now you know what I mean? Like, don't get your money back. Now you know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, so before we go linear, because I do want to go linear in a sec. Before we go linear, I want to shout out Alana Abernathy, who at this point is like
shout out to Alana.
Yeah, she at this point is like the Kevin Bacon of permission to speak freely. Like everything is connected through her some kind of way. So definitely shout out to her. And then shout out to you too, because like when you had us on your pod, just scheduling the booking, you know, me and Damon was running like this ragtag operation. You know, I hit you up on a DM. We go DM, you know, let's set this up. You know, you had he's like, yeah, reach out. I got an admin, I got an assistant or whatever. Hook it up. And I was like, damn, he got an assistant. Like this, like shit. Like, you know, we can work through this person and call it, you know, so, and we finally do have a spectacular admin, Denise. So another shout out to her. I'm trying to get her on the episode for like 5 minutes. I don't think she's going to come on. But so you brought that in. It took us a long time though, after we recorded with you, for it to happen for us, because it had to be somebody who had the same goal in mind and vision as us, especially with us being in the military and this not being like a profit thing at this moment for that person. So we had to make sure we had somebody who was passionate. But if it wasn't, but you were the first person that we saw have that type of, you know, operation. So that was, you know, that was inspiring, man.
Can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. Does the term EDOOG, is that offensive? Y'all mind the term EDOGs? Like enlisted, like EDOGs. In the Marine Corps, it'd be like EDOGs, you know.
I never heard it in the Navy.
Well, here's why I'm asking the question, because I have a soft spot in my heart for particularly EDOGs that are just getting after it. You know, whether they writing a book, they doing something positive or whatever, you know, like I like to support. So when I saw what y'all were doing with the podcast, checked out your, you know, your YouTube and stuff, I was like, these guys motivated. They out here talking about leadership, you know? So that's why I was excited to kind of reach out to you and see what you were doing, just to kind of even hear that perspective.
Yeah, I'm good. I don't feel no type of way about it, right? Somebody else might be like,
no, it is.
It's 2024.
Yeah,
people,
I know. That's so true. That's so true.
You know, especially
I'm gonna you blast me in my DM, you know?
Especially this week for perspective, all y'all, because I don't know when this episode coming out. So for perspective, we a couple of days fresh off the election. So, so all right, I want to backtrack and I want to go linear for a little bit, and I want to start out in Texas. You said single parent, right? That's mom. Yep. That's mom.
Yeah.
What took you from Texas to the Naval Academy? Well, Tyler, Texas.
Yeah. So my mom was a director of special education at a high school. Mm-hmm. And one of her colleagues, she had a son. And I was really close with her son. He was like 4 years older than me. So when I was a freshman in high school, he was a senior. And so he took me under his wing, taught me how to shave, like all that stuff. And so when he was graduating, he didn't go to college. He enlisted in the Army. And so then I was like, I'm going to enlist in the Army. I'm gonna be like him, right? His name was Jason. But my mom was all about raising me and my sister. I want my kids to go to college. My sister was 6 years older than me. She'd already gone. Had already graduated from the University of Texas. And she's like, I want, me to go to college. So me and her started looking at different ways that I could do both, be in the military and get an education. And then one day I came across the United States Naval Academy. I was like, I want to go there. I didn't have the grades. I had a terrible GPA, but I'm just one of those people, when I put my mind to something, I figure out a way to make it happen. And I learned that from my mom too, because she was just determined. She would drive me around in her little Honda to these events over here, events over there. Like if once I said that's what I wanted to do, and that's how it happened. So just perseverance, and got exposed to that world. It's funny. I live in New York City now. I'm out running this morning. I went for a walk at like Times Square, Central Park, whatever. I'm telling y'all, where I was growing up, New York and places were just things you saw on television.
Yeah.
Leaving the country. I mean, the first time I flew on a plane was like at the Naval Academy. It was like going to the Naval Academy. Yeah. So I had a chance to go to prep school for a year in Newport, Rhode Island. That's where they send a lot of enlisted that are trying to go to the academy as well. Uh-huh. So, because they have like 300 spots. But that's how I was able to do it. I went to prep school for a year, then went to Annapolis.
Yeah. Now, was it middle class? Or like, where would you say you fell into?
I was the working poor. I think we were the working poor.
Okay.
My family be blasting me on these podcasts you go, everybody has their lens through which they see life.
Yeah.
Right.
But like, just there's words I try not to use in my vocabulary now, because I think I got like financial trauma from them as a child, of like, you ask people how they're doing, they're like, just making it. Or you go to church, right? And all of a sudden your mom's standing up, testifying, with the pastor, says anybody, people crying about finances and stuff like that. So like literally just barely making it, like I think about that now. And it kind of goes back to the conversation we had even starting. There were times we would be at the ATM at midnight the day my mom got paid, like literally living paycheck to paycheck. So that's why I call it like the working poor. A single mom raising 2 kids on her own, like all the stuff that comes with that, and so think about that as an adult now, like not being at zero. You're like no cash flow, no margin, no nothing. It's kind of giving me a new appreciation and realization of like what we were up against.
Right.
But my mom was always the type of person that would put me in a good situation. So like we would live in an apartment, like a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment on the nice neighborhood town. So like all the little kids that did not look like me, the non-melanated, y'all to get that taken out, right? They had the nice big houses, whatever. And we'd be the like Black family living in a little 2-bedroom apartment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So did you know that you were like working poor back then, or were you just living a life?
I knew something was off, because I was just like, this ain't it for me personally. When you're growing up, you got a lot of people to say, man, as soon as I graduate, I'm out of here. I'm going somewhere far away. But then they never actually like pull the trigger. But for me, I just wanted more. I got tired of just seeing stuff on TV. I'm like, I'm just tired of people. I grew up in an environment, everybody was raised by their aunt, their grandma. There was like one dude. The only dad around was like that one family,
Right.
What's up, Mr. Jones? Or you had your basketball coach or your sports team, but everybody knows like the coach to a group of Black men without father figures around is like the father figure, and I think I deep down started to get resentful around it, like I didn't sign up for these circumstances, but you're kind of born into them. And so like, even when I said I wanted to go to the Naval Academy, I want to join the military, this is like 04, 05, people getting blown up in Iraq.
Right.
So people were looking at me like I was crazy. Like, you join the military, you're going to die,
Right.
You come back after a few years and all those people, they're starting to join the military because they don't have income. So I hate to say the like standard, typical Black male experience, but I feel like I had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, and Tish, sometimes you just know, like the TV will tell you. TV will tell you how much money you got.
TV will tell you, yeah.
I used to watch a show called The OC back when I was in high school. And all them kids, they lived in like Orange County. And they were rich. Like, you know what I'm saying? Houses like 4 to 5 times the size of the house I was living in. So you kind of knew, like you see them big ass bedrooms and stuff like that. Like, yo, I'll never have a bedroom this big. And that's like the youngest kid in the family. You know what I mean?
I don't know what y'all's situation was like growing up. This is how broke we were. Like on a Friday night, me and my friends would be like, we want to go to the movies. Right? And this back in the day, movies were like $6 or something. Bro, we'd be driving around town, borrowing $3 from this cousin, borrowing $3, from this to put the pool of money together so we could go to the movies,
Yeah.
And then even I think about with my mom, like the money rolls to pay for gas. Like if a gallon of gas was like $1.25, you couldn't even do the full. You'd be like, let me get 60 cents on, And so then you start looking back that stuff when you get older, you're like, yo, we really was up against it.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the time, it's just normal, You don't fill up the tank. You just put like $3 in.
And to get where you going.
$5 tank days. We didn't have much. We didn't have. My mom never drove a car, so we always took public transportation. Like we lived in Philly. We lived in Philly, so we always took public transportation. But we were rich in like family. Like we had family who had an impact. Grandparents and stuff like that. We just had a very strong impact. I remember for us, what we used to do is I think it was every Friday, my mom would get like Blockbuster video. She'd go get 2-3 movies for the weekend. And we watch them. We watch the movies and stuff. And every chance we get when we could, we go to like Old Country Buffet as a family or something like that. But
we really the same thing.
Yeah.
Same here.
It's not like we were living in squalor. I'm not talking about we were living in a trap house with like cockroaches or nothing like that. But just the reality, like, hey, there's a struggle here that's going on. We're pawning stuff to pay the bills. Things like that. So that lets me know like we were up against it. Now I never went home without like love by any means, right? I had a roof over my head.
Yeah,
I had those things, but just like the reality of like the financial situation. And one of the things I struggle with now is like, I'm going to take off my arm. I got another confession. I got an entrepreneurial mental health coach who I meet with. And one of the things that I've learned is that like there is this thing called like financial trauma and things like that, because you can get stuck in that that moment in time. You know what I'm saying? So despite being a successful entrepreneur, Naval Academy grad, Marine officer, et cetera, sometimes I still feel like that black kid at the ATM with his mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Because when I first started my entrepreneur journey, whenever my bank account would get at a certain point, I would start stressing, thinking that I'm gonna go right back to how things were back, growing up. Because like I kind of made a vow to myself that I didn't want to struggle like that, and I didn't realize necessarily that I was struggling, how much we were struggling until I was an adult. I think my mom did a pretty decent job of covering it up. Yeah. And somehow she just kind of always make ends meet and make stuff happen, even like extra stuff. Like I was in band and stuff like that. And so we had trips and all that. And somehow, some way, she would always like come up with the money whenever I asked. And it wasn't from my dad either. I don't know what mama was doing.
I'm not going to name my friend. But like, I think he had an epiphany one day. He was like watching a Tyler Perry movie or something. He called me. He was like, yo, Stead. I was like, I already know, bro. I've been there. Because that point where you just start watching these black films on television and it just be hitting different. Like, why that shit look so familiar?
Right.
And you be picking up the phone, calling people like, wait a minute, what? Oh,
you remember that time? Like,
You really don't respect. Like, it's like that hindsight to put like what your mom and them really did in perspective. When you are like 100,000 a year, 110,000 a year, and you struggling. You like, my mom was how was she making $50 stretch for 2 weeks with 3 kids, and all of that stuff. Hey, so, just to move forward a little bit to the Naval Academy, you get to the Naval Academy And how's that for you? How was that experience for you?
I love the Naval Academy. It was great. But at first, it was very challenging for me because you get in this environment, right? And again, you know, I came from a black community, right? We went to a black church, you know, you had all those different things, right? Then you get to an environment like the Naval Academy and all the people that look like you work in the kitchen. You know what I'm saying? Like you see the old black lady back there serving food that remind you of like your people, you know? And I always try to tell people this when it comes to like being a black person in America. You don't really know until you don't really have a true appreciation for how different you think and feel and stuff until you're put in an environment where you're like one-on-one.
Right.
You know? Because then all of a sudden it's like put in front of your face. Like real. And so like you're far away, but you know, you get over that, you kind of learn to grow and adapt. And the other thing too is like even me being older now, you know, we're post-election. So you get a lot of people that bring their own kind of biases and, you know, I'm gonna call it what it is, racism and all these other things. Right. But as I've gotten older, I've actually learned to kind of forgive people and appreciate people because they were just doing what they learned from their peoples.
Yeah.
You know, and now all of a sudden you got all these young, just like on a ship, you got a bunch of young people, you know, trying to figure out their own like identities and how they see the world and stuff, etc. Now, if you acted a certain way when you were 18, 19, whatever, like I forgive you now. But if you're like 37, 40, the same kind of views and whatever, then I can't really help you, you know. But just kind of all of that, trying to figure yourself out. You know, you're black male in this environment, you know, it's very officer heavy. Nobody on the wall look like you. Ain't no statues that look like, you know, all that kind of stuff. And you're just trying to figure yourself out. You're trying to find your way. But it was great. I mean, my best friends till this day are like Naval Academy grads. Because, you know, one thing I like about it too is like, you know, you just have people you go through life with. You know, you starting to put in real years with people, 15, 20 years. So I got exposed to boxing while I was there. I got my education. It was very surreal to kind of being there because I never, and again, these are things that you're learning to kind of push past, but I never thought I was that smart. Now, mind you, I'm at the Naval Academy, you know, team struggle bus, right? Got like 2.1 trying to make it, studying history and everything like that. But people were really impressed that you like go to the academy.
Yeah.
You know, and I did not want to fumble. I don't want to say fumble the bag like the young boys say now, but like I just didn't want to mess up this opportunity. So I was very determined about graduating. I wasn't just there to just, you know, check a box, right? So I did my thing, was able to graduate, had great connections. I learned entrepreneurship at the academy, to be honest, because it was the first time. Just you see stuff you're just not exposed to growing, at least where I was growing up. Like the Naval Academy was the first spot I saw where a student corrected the professor, the teacher. Like the teacher put something on the board and this person's like, "Oh, that's wrong, sir."
Yeah, that sounds like
I was like, "What?"
That sounds like a midshipman.
That sounds like a midshipman, right?
Yeah,
and you're like, "No way." And he's like, "Oh, this guy's got like a PhD, you know, and he's getting corrected." And being exposed to, I call these people uncommon humans. I might write a book about them one day. Y'all know the type, right? Navy SEAL, go to college, MIT 4.0, got multiple PhDs. They just move at a level that is just surreal. And being able to be exposed to that, it does rub off on you. And so I think that was the cool part about the academy is like having different people kind of pour into you, having different classmates that you can learn a little of this from, a little bit of that from. And like they say, like a rising tide lifts all boats. So I think that was a big takeaway for me there.
So boxing, right? So before you talk about boxing, I want to talk about like, so I'm stationed at pretty much in Annapolis right now, right? And they got like, I want to go to, they got this boxing thing that happens. And I want to go watch the people fight, but they beat the shit out of each other. Like they like bleeding and everything, right? So it's not like, you know, this normal kind of like no blood, touchy-feely boxing. They whooping each other's ass, right? Is that the boxing that you're talking about that you were doing?
Yeah. I was captain of my boxing team, but it was even higher level than that because honestly, what you see at the event is nothing compared to what happens at the nationals, you know, and some more of the collegiate boxing. Because that show at Navy is just Naval Academy versus Naval Academy. But the Navy boxing team actually travels across the country competing against other schools, right? And then we also train in inner city gyms across the country. So like that's how I ended up in Newark, was because my sophomore year, we took for spring break, while everybody goes to the beach or whatever, the boxing team has to stay back and train. And so my year, we went to New York City. We trained at all these inner city gyms in New York, got the brakes beat off us. Like bad, right? Like y'all know who Gervonta Davis is?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we trained at his gym, beat the brakes off everybody. I didn't spar him because I was a light heavyweight, but he was like a 12-year-old. He was 12 beating like grown men, like 22, 23-year-old. So that's the level we were training at. But it exposed me to, that boxing world, and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah. So what brought you into it? Like, what made you check the box that I want to box? Like, what even made you do that?
You have to pick a sport at Navy. And at first I had come from being on a team. I played high school basketball, and by playing, I mean, I was like not getting the game unless we're about 30 points and there was like 2 minutes left, like we had to be blowing somebody out for me to get in. But I like that camaraderie, the team. And so I looked at like what sports took walk-ons. And so at first I was going to do crew, but you have to run like 3 miles to the crew house. I was like, I want to be on one of the boats, but you get there. This was like, you usually up just pulling the erg till you puke. And I was like, all right, this ain't it.
Yeah.
And I had to pick a sport. So I walked into the boxing gym with one of my classmates and just never left.
Mm. Did you fight before? Were you into fighting before that? Did you ever have a fight before that?
I hadn't. And the reason, going back to, like you asked me, like, why? Remember what I said about identities, right? Like, you ever see that poster of a boxer just looking hard? It's like Bernard Hopkins, or it's like Mike Tyson and Holyfield, the old school. I was like, I want what he got. Like that swag, I want whatever that is. And the first time I sparred, it was such a surreal feeling. And I realized like, people spar like it's pickup basketball. Like I wanted to feel like that, And it was not like that at the time. It was like terrifying. You're like, oh my God, this is, you can't even breathe. But like, I wanted to have that skill set to where I could just spar like it was pickup basketball. And so, I stuck with boxing.
Yeah, and then like 2-time MVP. What?
Yeah, 3-time national boxing champ, 2-time most valuable boxer, and captain of my boxing team.
Yeah, and that's what I'm assuming that's like 3 out of 4 years that you're there, right?
Yeah.
And it's an annual. It's annual, right? For the
so freshman year, I was still, because I had never boxed before. Yeah. Freshman year, I was kind of learning the ropes. I was figuring things out. And then I hit the ground running my sophomore year because my mom had a stroke my sophomore year. So she ended up having to be put in a nursing home. She was paralyzed on the left side of her body. And so I really just kind of put all my heart and focus into boxing. And that was the thing that I really started to lean on to even get through the academy.
Mm-hmm. And then when you talk about, so was that like, were you leaning on like anger or just fear or some sort of like?
I think just anger, focus, it's like, because boxing is like a poor man's sport, like there's a reason that, just quite frank, young, black, brown, poor kids are real good at boxing. They got nothing else. That's like their food on the table for a lot of them, right? Because the sport in general attracts a lot of kids who are either gonna, they would just be in the streets otherwise, And I think for me, it was like, although I was eating, I still had that hunger because it was like, me against the world, it felt like.
Mm-hmm. So just this off topic, but it's still about boxing, but it's off topic. What you think about this whole Mike Tyson and Paul fight that's coming up?
I think people are delusional.
Yeah.
I think people are straight delusional. Like, I know boxing. Mike Tyson got like knocked out like his last 5 fights. Everybody sees Mike Tyson, like they think like the heyday Mike Tyson. No, it's like the Mike Tyson that was knocked out, multiple times towards the tail end. And then you add like 30 years on him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that kind of answers that question. Hey, you talked about connections. Like you talked about making, and I'm assuming it's like just normal like college networking, right? Like just making friends who got connections in places and stuff like that. Because I did want to ask you about the how'd you get to Newark from, after your career in the Marines, which we're about to get into. So, but that was based off like another midshipman as a connection, or one of the professors or something like that?
So in the environment I grew up in, right, there was always that social kind of give back component, right? Like, yeah, me and my frat brothers talk about this. Like, if you're a successful black man, especially like an athlete or something, you don't go back and build a school or something, you ain't jack. You know what I'm saying? Like, we just kind of have that because you got to lift as you climb. Because if we don't do it, really, no one else is. And so that was the kind of community I brought up in. So I was always looking for opportunities, kind of mentor and just kind of give back. I got an email at the Naval Academy and it said, hey, we're looking for midshipmen to go intern at this school in Newark, New Jersey that catered to young men of color called St. Benedict's Prep. It was an all-boys school. And we want midshipmen to go there and do some leadership, right?
Yeah.
I show up to the meeting. It's like all black midshipmen.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm looking around like, what? And then the professor comes in and he's like, his name was Dr. Horner. He's like, look, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. I need black midshipmen to go to this place called Newark, New Jersey. The headmaster reached out to us and said, hey, I need midshipmen that look like our kids to come back here and do this. And we'll feed them. They can stay with us, et cetera. We just want to do it to kind of expose them to the Naval Academy and stuff, et cetera. And so I was part of the second group that went. It was like a little hit team. It was like 4 of us, 2 guys and 2 girls.
Yeah.
All African-American. And, I came to Newark. I had never seen a private school with a boarding component that catered to like black and brown kids before, let alone all boys. And so I just love that concept. I thought it was dope. And I just fell in love with it. And so I came back 2 years in a row on an internship there. And I told the headmaster, I was like, yeah, when I get out of the military, I'm going to come back and I'm going to start a boxing program here. So that's what I did.
I think that's kind of cool because Newark nickname is the Bricks, right?
Yeah.
At least back then, they called Newark that. What I always knew about Newark, living in Philly is Newark is the hood. You know what I'm saying? Did you know that Newark had that reputation when you were?
I did. It was like a goth. I never, but like, again, you go up in Texas, we had our little projects and stuff in Texas.
Yeah.
But like when you listening to like the Fugees driving down South Orange Ave in Newark, New Jersey, it hits different. You listen to Nas, you're like, oh,
yeah.
whatever. It's like it just kind of hit.
It's
a different. And so part of that too was also kind of exciting. And then after my experience boxing, training in New York City that summer, I wanted to be closer to New York City. I wanted to be a real inner city boxing coach, right? I wanted to create the Tank Davises of the world and whatever. And you got to go to where the heat is. You got to go where kids are hungry. And so that's where I came to Newark and I was just kind of head down. And I knew it at the time that it was like a rough, because every time I was like, why are you moving to Newark? But also like, I think one of the reasons my transition went well, because it's like big fish, small pond. Like I'm not saying I could have made moves in Harlem or New York City when I first got out, but like I had to grow too, like to even know how to like leverage these, because I got people here in New York City eating people up.
Yeah.
They eat people, because again, what I talk about competition, and it's not that like you're competing against all these other people, but like there's just, when you're in one of these environments, DC is the same way. When you just get hungry, ambitious, young, getting after it, not even young, just people getting after it, and you got to compete and stand out and stuff, et cetera. And so when I, hitting the ground in Newark, I was able to get my momentum going. I was able to do my thing, develop myself a little bit. So.
Yeah. So I know home is home and I understand that. But out of everywhere you lived at, where do you feel most connected to?
That's a good question. Up until recently, I would have definitely said Annapolis. Just because, it was a big part of my life. But man, I've been traveling. You start seeing other people, the way other people live in other places and stuff. And I would honestly say home is probably where, I don't know, my friends and stuff are. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm very like minimalist, as long as I got good people around me, that's wherever.
Yeah. Do you make friends everywhere you go?
I do. Like I went to Nepal. They was joking. I got voted mayor of Mount Everest. Just because I was like mean, like, I'm dapping people up. I was like, "Are you from Newark? Oh, what's up, bro? New Jersey, what's up?"
Yeah.
I'm just a naturally social person.
Yeah. Hey, So let's talk about the Marines, because you graduate the academy and then you go to Marine Corps for 5 years as an officer. What year? So this is about 2010, matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's even a little less diverse than it is now.
Less diverse. It was it was not diverse at all.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
It was not diverse at all. And I was an infantry officer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was hard. The Marine Corps was, that first 2 years was team struggle bus.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. And I'm assuming you saw some. How does that work out there when you're an officer and you got enlisted, but y'all out? Because you were in battle at times, right? Or in the fight, right? So, I mean, because I'm assuming rank don't really matter that much when y'all all out there together, right?
No, bro. It matters a lot because you in charge. You know? See, the difference between the Navy and the Marine Corps or even the Army is like, there really ain't that many Marine officers. You know? So you'll be out somewhere and you like the only one. You know? So, you know, specifically, like, I'll talk about the first part where I said team struggle bus. I used to always, like, even at the Naval Academy, I was an athlete, I was in shape. They're like, you should be a Marine. And then all the seasons, like, don't go Marine. They like, you don't want to be a Marine. They're like, you don't hunt, you don't fish, you don't go. I was like, I'm hoorah, I want to go, whatever. But then you get to the Marine Corps, now you having to like sleep outside. And it sounds insane, like you should know this already, obviously. But it's a different thing when you're doing it like day in and day out. Like, you know, Marines are crazy. They got the dip bottles, you know, they're spitting. I ain't never seen that before. They got the little packs that they're hitting. It's like a very like outdoorsy, whatever. And so like I had to learn how to not even just survive, but thrive in the field, getting snowed on and stuff, because I'm getting looked at through a different lens because I'm an officer, you know? And then you add on the fact that guys from the Naval Academy, right? So I had to basically do OJT. I had to learn a lot of stuff on the job while getting evaluated as a Marine officer, you know, while being like one of one, you know? So that was just a lot. And then you're getting punched in the face by life in general, bad leaders. You know what it is? It's like, welcome to the fleet, you know? So you're going through all that, like kind of at the same time. So that was very, very challenging. And then you get to combat, right? So you go to Afghanistan and stuff, et cetera. And then one thing I have an appreciation for now as I get older, we were put in an impossible situation. You know, like you know, you think about like the military and the history of the military, whatever. I know you mentioned before about commanders getting relieved and stuff like that. Like, think about how realistic, when you sit back sometimes, think like, are these people always put in positions to win, you know, at like a high level? Just in a sense of like what we're doing is hard. Like winning the war in Afghanistan is hard. You know what I'm saying? Going to Afghanistan and patrolling and fighting the Taliban, like these are hard things. And we assume that, you know, because we're, you know, I won't say the word is brainwashed, right? But we always assume that there's a way to figure stuff out, that there's a way to win and yada, yada, yada. And when you make mistakes and you fail on certain things, whatever, a lot of times we eat that as the individual as like, oh, and I do believe in like extreme ownership to an extent, but I think we can also recognize sometimes like, yo, give yourself grace. You know, you're in a hard situation. You know, let's say you got a young, I don't know, what's the word? Petty officer, right? That's in charge of a ragtag group of whatever from all across the country. You know, they're like fighting each other and stuff like that. And let's say like it doesn't work out so good for that petty officer because he just couldn't make it work. He's still in a hard situation. You know, not a lot of people are, you know, managing conflict like that. And so that's what I was equating to of like, you know, when I think about like our generation of war veterans, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan, like we were really put in some very hard situations.
What was your worst experience while you were in the Marines period?
My worst experience, man, my worst experience.
It's like, which one?
There was a lot, man. Like, honestly, I don't know, man. It's hard to explain. I don't know. It's hard to answer that question. I'll tell you, I got relieved in combat in Afghanistan. one of those impossible situations I was talking about, right? Like I was in that. So that was very difficult. The realization of just how hard the Marines was. Like, you know, going through the infantry officer course, that was one of the like hardest things I'd ever done up until that point. So it's like a 3-month school in the winter in Quantico, Virginia. Yeah. And like when you're an officer, like, and you're a Marine in general, nobody cares. Like nobody loves you. You know what I mean? People just start dropping, you know? So just kind of, it's just very hard. I probably sometimes the isolation I felt, you know, that was kind of hard. Especially when, you know, you have a situation where you get fired, especially in combat. Now it's like, how do you show up around your peers? And, you know, you know what it was? And it was that because, you know, when it happened, right, I was so close to the end of my deployment, you know? So I got relieved like 1 month before my deployment ended. And I didn't feel like coming back and being proud about my military service. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're kind of not robbed of it, you know, but it's just like, you don't want to talk about it. You can't come back and be that, you know, you don't feel like you won. Right. And so that was very challenging because like I came back from Afghanistan. I didn't want to talk about Afghanistan like at all.
Yeah. Do you still not want to talk about it?
No, I'll talk about Afghanistan all day now.
Okay. Yeah. What was your, like, the best experience?
What was the best experience? Man, that I'm usually like pretty good on podcasts. Like
it's funny because they
you're
like
hitting
softball.
me in like the deep questions. Like these aren't even softball questions. You think they're softball questions?
Yeah, because they could go. It's like throwing a little pebble in the water because they could go kind of everything, kind of shockwaves. And
you know what my best experience was? I'll tell you what my best experience was in the Marine Corps. When I first got to my unit, right? One of the things I did, because when you go to the academy, there's a stigma of like Naval Academy officers. You know, they call us ring knockers and et cetera, et cetera. And so when I graduated the academy, I didn't go into the Marine Corps with a lot of my class, right? I went like, basically we have a time to like, you can take off like a month or a couple of months before you start the Marine Corps and go, a lot of classmates go travel and stuff, but I wanted to hit the ground running. I was motivated. I kind of want to be my own man. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to go in the Marine Corps. I don't need the Naval Academy background, you know, whatever. And like, you're kind of embarrassed too. Cause like sometimes they kind of talk about the academy and whatever. And so you just want to earn it on your own.
Yeah.
But then honestly, you get to the fleet and it's like, I don't know how it is in like the Navy for y'all, but in the Marine Corps, it's still very competition heavy. Cause somebody's going to get ranked 1, 2, 3 for officers, right? They're always going to kind of rank you. And so you get in that environment, right? You're kind of figuring it out. Like I said before about learning that OJT, the people that didn't go to the Naval Academy, maybe they didn't get in, you know, they're looking at you like, oh, you ain't so bad. You know what I mean? So then there's that aspect of it. And so when, you know, there just feels like this kind of tension at times, right? And the isolation you feel, you know, especially when you're not performing at, you know, the highest level, right? You can feel like a little bit of pariah. But after I got relieved from in Afghanistan, they put me in a little purgatory, little officer purgatory for a little bit. But then they brought me back to my unit. And when they brought me back to my unit, there just so happened to be a new group of officers that were coming in. And a bunch of them were my buddies from the Naval Academy.
Oh, nice.
Right? So now all of a sudden, it's like y'all against the world. You know? Because that's the benefit of the academy. Because like, you know, yeah, it's still maybe a little competition, but like everybody wants everybody to win, you know? And just the like, I finally felt like somebody was watching out for my back. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't just, I didn't feel so isolated. I had this peer group I could rely on and stuff like that. And so that was a really good experience. And then my officer, my commanding officer too, that I came back with in the unit, you know, my confidence was kind of low because I got relieved, you know, I'd already gone through that. And so like, then you're going back in the meat grinder of the infantry. Yeah. But man, I had a company commander, man, took me in, gave me a fair shot. Had a great rest of my career.
So you did 5 years, right? And how many deployments did you do in these 5 years?
I did 3. I did 6 months in Afghanistan. I did 6 months in Japan, and then like a 3-week stint in the Philippines.
Okay. So in between deployments, like I guess it's like you just working your way into going on deployment, something like that?
Yeah. So a lot of times it's a workup, right? So like as soon as I got to my unit, 1st and 8th Marines, they had just got back from Afghanistan. And so they shotgunned some lieutenants out. Some lieutenants moved up to senior positions. We jumped in. Then we did our workup. Then we deployed to Afghanistan. And then I got relieved. And so when we came back from Afghanistan, I got sent to officer purgatory. But I got brought back 6 months later, or 6-7 months later. And so then I joined this new unit in the workup.
Yeah. How long did the 6 months in Afghanistan feel like? Did it feel like 6 months, or does it feel like a year?
It probably felt like 6 months.
Okay.
I don't know how the Army does it, to be honest. I don't know how the Army was doing those year-long deployments and stuff, et cetera. Because Marines start wanting to chop off heads after like 6 months. You start to lose your mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay, so now you get out. Now, when do you know you're getting out? Did you know you was getting out like after 5, like when you first got in, or was it some things that kind of showed you like, okay, I'm getting up out of here? While you were in.
This was before I got relieved, because I think, everybody saw the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of conversations about it. Man, that writing was on the wall back in 2012 when I was there. Because you're told you're going to this country to, liberate them and yada, yada, yada. And the mission we were told about why we were there, it was very different from the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of military in general, I can speak for a lot of officers personally, we tend to be more like very idealist, like kind of like the true believers, mission-driven purpose, whatever. But then you get in country and there was just this disconnect, and it created a little bit of cognitive dissonance. And so that's what I was saying before about, like, I don't know if I want this to be my legacy, God forbid I step on an IED and something happens and then that's it. That's like the Mike Steadman story. So at that point, I realized like there was more that I kind of wanted to do than those things. And so that's when that happened. And then after I got relieved, for sure, it was like, all right, I'm done with this.
Yeah. So now what do you get out of the Marines with? Like, not just financially, but like mentally, emotionally, like all that. Like, what do you leave with?
Just so mental toughness, I think. And the hard part is, right? You got to protect that and you got to cultivate it. So there's been times where you like, I call it a ground punch, right? Like sometimes you need a little ground punch, remind yourself who you are. So you do have this kind of level of intensity, this level of viewing the world, right? This just kind of mindset of like kind of getting after it, right? But if you're not careful, you can peak too soon. You see what I'm saying? People that like sprint at the first half of life, but then it's like not having sustainability kind of long term. And so whether that's physical fitness, whether that's your mindset, whether that's all those different things. So definitely that taking that away from the Marine Corps and just trying to protect it, like that intensity about just getting after life. And then honestly, I'll be honest, being a Marine officer just slaps, right? Like or in general, I'm just going to be honest, right? When people find out like, oh, what you do, and you say you were a Marine, and they find out you were like a Marine officer or you're just Marine in general, right? It just kind of hits different. But I will be honest to say that like not a lot of African-American Marine infantry officers interact in a lot of circles that I move personally in. And so people are always kind of taken back by that.
Yeah. So it's just cachet there. It's just cachet and just being a Marine Corps officer, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So then you got it made up in, what's up, Tish?
Oh, I was about to say, so going back to you being relieved, it seemed like from up until that point, you hadn't really had a lot of huge failures in your life. So when you went through that and you were able to rebound from that, it sounds like, is that kind of what helps you when you're doing your entrepreneur? Like, there's going to be setbacks and, you being able to push through. Was that something that, and did you kind of inspire yourself as you see yourself fail and then still succeed in the end?
100%. But it wasn't even just the relief part. It was like, there was just a lot of stuff leading even up to that, like my experience. So like, that was a big failure, but there were little failures along the way, or I'm kind of, made to feel like failures, whatever. But I will say that was definitely a reality of like life. That's that big kind of punch in the gut, kind of life is hard kind of situation. But I do credit that, having experienced that earlier, versus like experiencing something like that when you're like 40 or 50, it feels devastating.
Right.
And then you see like how people can easily, go left. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely built my tolerance up for, the reality.
Nice.
Did that answer your question?
It did. Yes, absolutely.
So,
Go ahead,
so you got it made up in your mind that you're going to Newark, right? So like when you're getting
Correct.
out, you kind of like metaphorically like on a bus to Newark, right?
Yeah.
All right. And then you get there and is the job already waiting on you?
There was really no job for me when I got there. Like my first night in Newark, I was like slept on a couch in the residence hall.
Mm.
So there was nothing. He had planned nothing formally for me. It was all about just kind of figuring it out and like making it work. But because it was a headmaster, he was a headmaster, so he could do whatever. So people were looking at me sideways. They were like, "Who is this guy? Marine? Is he taking my job?"
Yeah. So then you start now. How like what were you doing at that job? Was it boxing? Was it like I
spent like the first month not knowing what I was doing. Like 2 months. Like they put me in the monastery housing, so I lived in the monastery housing, and it's funny because I have these specific moments in life, right? I remember being in Newark. It's like I'm in this monastery and I'm looking out the window. And it's that moment like, did I just mess up my life? You know what I'm saying? You're like, this is pre-Ironbound. This is pre-everything. I'm like, what was I thinking? Did I just whatever? And it's funny because I look back on those moments now and you kind of need those, right? Where you're like, kind of, because that was a moment where there were definitely no guarantees.
Mm.
There was no guarantees. It was a hope and a wish. But I had to hit the little I believe button and figure things would work out. 2 months later, he finally told me what my job was going to be. They put me in charge of the residence hall. So they had a group of kids that lived on campus. There's about 60 or 70 of them. And I was a glorified house parent. So that's what I did. I was like raising teenage boys, putting them to bed, feeding them. I was Mr. Steadman. It was like being a platoon commander again. But I worked in the evening, which gave me the day to myself to just work out, coach boxing. And so that's how I was able to do my boxing program because I worked it into my job with St. Benedict's. I was like, I'll do it. I just need to be able to coach boxing.
Yeah. Now, while you're in Newark, is it like any temptation either from like back home to come home or any temptation in your head to pivot, anything like that?
Never, not really. I mean, I think we might be, Tisha, when did you graduate high school?
2003.
Okay, you graduated 2003. What about you?
Same, actually.
Did any of y'all go back home after you? Did you go back home, Tisha?
No, I stayed in Cali.
So there's like a generation of like where you were young, you moved out the house, right? It's just what it is. Once you go home, you can't go back kind of deal. And so that's kind of where I had come from. So like I had already moved past that the day I left.
Yeah.
Okay. So then like with like the coaching boxing, right? What are anything that you do in life, but I want to start like from back in these earlier days when you first started figuring out how you manifesting this stuff. Are you like writing it down or like how are you kind of bringing all this stuff into fruition?
Man, I was just getting after it. I was very hungry. I was full of piss and vinegar, right? And we're going to talk about this because it does relate to entrepreneurship, but like you're so naive, you don't know any better, So you're just loving every day. I mean, I was like, man, I had a roof over my head. I'm working out, 3 times a day. I'm good. I got no problems, got a place to stay. It was great. So I was just living the dream. I was just like doing it, Now there was hitting a little bit of I believe button because like even back then, like I didn't have a gym. I had the residence hall. So I used to bring a little boom box, plug it up in the corner, push tables and chairs out the way, teach kids how to box in the residence hall. But in my mind, I always had the vision for the gym. So even though, we're in the residence hall, I always had the bigger vision. And I just kept nurturing that. And worked on it. But pretty soon, like within a year and a half of moving to Newark, I launched the Ironbound Boxing Academy.
Yeah. It's crazy, Tish. You know what I'm thinking about right now?
What?
While Mike talking, I'm thinking about like family or dating or like anything outside of, boxing and getting life where life needs to be. Is that happening for you too? Are you like, were you already in a relationship at this time?
I wasn't when I moved to Newark, but shortly after I got there, I did have one.
Okay. What a lady from Newark?
yeah, she had moved there and then I moved there too. And so we connected. And so I was just living the dream. Like I was head down. I was a man. You know, I don't get biblical with y'all, but you know when they say like when you got your purpose and you're getting after it, you're just kind of focused, right?
Right.
I was in that moment. I was in that world.
Yeah.
You
And how long is that happening? How long was that like grind for you?
It was a grind. It was really like, so, you know, so and this is for all you aspiring entrepreneurs out there, and y'all can relate to this with this podcast. See, at first you come with this idea, you get that instant endorphin hit from what's possible. You know, you don't know what's possible. You have a vision for what's possible, but you haven't seen it yet. You haven't truly experienced it yet. You haven't touched it yet. Then you do the thing. Now your reality is like, am I podcasting twice a week for the next bazillion years? You know what I mean? Like you're in the day to day, you know? And the first couple years, right, it's sustainable. You're feeling good. But then like 1 year turns to 3, 3 turns to 5, 5 turns, you know? And now all of a sudden, that piss and vinegar you had in the early days, everything just looked like work. You know,
I'm
people come up with good ideas. We should do this. I'm like, let me stop you right there. Right?
Yeah, that's how it is.
You already know what it's going to take. It's going to be a huge lift, you know? And everybody loves, especially in environments like the Newarks, when you're doing something good for the community or whatever. I'd have been through cycles where everybody promises your world, but I'm going to be the one day there grinding in and out. And then over time, that kind of spark just kind of, And so now I start to understand why you need that young energy sometimes to kind of come in. Cause like, there's just things that like, I was talking with my coach about this, like, I'm going to do this exercise called reflect back, look forward. Every year, there are certain things that I do not want to take in with me in the new year. You know, like even in my business, there's things I used to do. Like I haven't edited a podcast in like 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, because like I'm over editing the podcast, right? Like that's just not where I want to spend my time and my energy. So I was able to brought me in CJ. She's the head of production. She does all that for our clients and whatever. So you just kind of keep moving in kind of new realms. And so that's kind of what happened with that, was just like, you just outgrow certain things.
Yeah, it's crazy that you bring that up, because it got me thinking about, I saw you got something, T. Hold on. It got me thinking about like that Tupac quote about like people over a certain age, they lose like, you know, that fight. And I remember being a young petty officer. Hey, for the people that don't know, because I ain't finished, it's like Tupac said, like people over a certain age, they lose their fire, like they lose their passion, they lose all of that fight that they had. I remember being a young petty officer and thinking about when I got into positions like the position I'm in, right? And just how combative that I would be when I got to this position. Like, because I was combative as a young petty officer, right? And now I get to this position, and as much as I want to do and as much as I try to do, I'm not the fighter that I was before. Like, I might be like a smarter fighter. You know, I might be a little bit more tricky when it comes to like getting my way. And I'm not like as abrasive as I used to be. But some of that fire, like you said, some of that fire is lit in a different way, man. You know what I'm saying?
But Muhammad Ali said it best. A man who views the world at 50 the same way he did at 20 has wasted 30 years. You know, and sometimes when you're, you know, we know it, when you start to grow, they're like, oh, he acting different. Oh, he moving different. No, he's growing up. He got more experiences. You got a different lens. Yeah. You know? And it's just like, I don't have time for things that just the energy drainers of the younger years. I just got no time for it. I'm just sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were talking about first starting off and the energy, I remember when I first started, I decided I was going to be an entrepreneur. And so I went through a few things before I found what my niche was. And I ended up in the Airbnb space almost on accident. And I was like going hard, and, you know, I started doing this, doing that. Like, oh, I want more. And then I got a few properties, and then that went into doing Turo. And then I started coach people on how to do that. And then after a while, it was just like, I'm tired. Like,
tired of the same problems.
Right. And because it was just like, okay, I'm having to constantly and I was in I call it like my fuck it era when I first started. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, fuck it, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna buy another car, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm getting another property, you know? And it's just like, I just kind of drained myself after a while and trying to, you know, closing one Airbnb, opening up another one and all the twists and the turns. And then like some people that, you know, I would talk to about it and they're like, oh, let's go in together and let's do this. And I'm like, nah.
Y'all ain't ready. Y'all don't know.
I don't even want to do it. Right. Like I have my properties now and I have my cars and I'm not trying to expand anything.
Yeah.
And I don't even like do anything with my cars anymore. Like I have someone else completely running that because that gave me the most headache. And so I just decided that I'm going to just get rid of it altogether.
For the listeners, Tish had to go. She had to go do something. So for the viewers, y'all just saw her disappear like after she was in the middle of talking, right? But we had a little a connectivity issue and she had to go do something very important, man.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like just kind of wrapping up what we were talking about before she left is just that again, people just grow and evolve. And I just think it's a natural kind of evolution, right? Like, and so there are just certain things that, you know, again, just understand that the space you're in now might not be the space you're in 5, 10 years from now. And that's okay. You know, that's okay.
So right now in our kind of linear journey through some of your life, we're at a part where you're still working at the school and you're coaching.
Yeah.
That's all I know right now. You working at the school and you coaching. What's next?
So it kind of got to a conflict at a point, just me mentally, just cognitive dissonance, where like, you know, when I first moved to Newark, I was, again, Mr. Steadman, bedding kids down in the residence hall and stuff, etc. But I got more and more excited about I got exposed to entrepreneurship. I was able to do this program at Stanford called Stanford Ignite for post 9/11 veterans. And so like my world was just kind of opening up, and it got to the point to where like I wanted to do Ironbound full time, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to focus on Ironbound full time. And so in 2018, I left my job at St. Benedict's and started teaching boxing full time, right? Like I did it at the gym in the evening for free with the kids. And in the day I was running around New York City, training CEOs, teaching boxing classes at places like WeWork and Spotify. And so that was 2018 is really like my entrepreneurial born day, right? Because it's one thing when you're like got your side hustle going, whatever. It's a whole different ball game when it becomes your main source of income.
Yeah.
And so I had to level up real quick.
So what got, and it's, man, talking to you, man, there's so many things that just happen, and I gotta try to dig into them, you know, just so somebody listening could get an understanding to get from, you know, wherever you were to wherever you are wherever they need to be from wherever they are. So you said Stanford Ignite.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Classmate from the Naval Academy. I was going to a wedding. I picked him up from the airport, was telling him about what I was doing. We had like a 3-hour car drive, and he was like, you got to do this program. You got to do this program. And he followed up, sent me the application. It's like, did you do it? Did you do it? You know, he made me put him as a reference, and then I got exposed to that program. And that's what introduced me to veteran entrepreneurship. Because honestly, when I was getting out, I kind of had a negative view of veterans just a little bit. Just like I wanted to be my own man again. I didn't want to, you know, be the vet walk around with the campaign cover, you know, the hat, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I got to Stanford Ignite. I'm around all these other veterans. We're talking about entrepreneurship and starting businesses. I was like, oh, this is kind of dope. And that exposed me to that community. And I've just been entrenched in it like ever since. Right. So it's like, oh, we can rally around being a veteran, and it can be around like entrepreneurship and stuff like that. Because in Newark too, to be honest, when I got out, there was a stigma against veteran because, you know, some people's experience to veteran is just like the homeless veteran, the veteran struggling for a job and whatever. And that's just like an energy that I did not want to have, you know, personally. You know, I wanted to be kind of focused or whatever. But once I got exposed to like, they just made veterans sound badass again. You know, there was a time when like being a vet was like a badass. Like you had that World War II or Korean War, you know, teacher, you know, and he was like, oh man, Mr. Mr. Jones, we heard you was a sniper in Vietnam. He's like, who told you that? You know?
Yeah.
Like, and it was just kind of mysterious versus like, you know, you're getting out and it depends on where environment you're in because like the veteran environment in New York City is a little bit different than the veteran environment in Newark. But there would just seem to be this like negative stigma. But I got exposed to veteran entrepreneurship. And I was like, I can hang out with veterans and talk business. This is cool. And so that's kind of what I did.
So now you also just said, right? Like I said, it's a lot. Like it's a lot, right? So you also just said that you were training people from WeWork in places like Spotify and stuff like that. How? Like, how do you even get to those connections?
It's a great question. So there's a business strategy called a Trojan horse. So when you when you start a new business and you're going from 0 to 1, right? And you have these aspirational clients, right? You're like WeWork, Spotify and stuff, et cetera. They're aspirational because you haven't booked them yet, right? And the chances of you in your little 1-bedroom apartment, you know, getting one of these big companies, we don't know what the hell you're doing, is very low. And I coach a lot of entrepreneurs on this because they put these big companies and I say, who's your perfect customer? And they say them. I'm like, well, have you ever run a class out of there? Have you served them services, whatever? Most of the answer is no. But what you have happen is you'll have other companies that serve these clients and they need a skill set that you bring to the table, which just so happened to be, in my case, boxing. So there was another company called Exuberancy, and it was one of the largest and most successful wellness companies in the city. They had Spotify as a client. So I actually got booked through Exuberancy to teach the boxing class at Spotify. I got paid nothing, like $100, right, to do it. But I got the clout to say I was teaching at Spotify, which let me get the $1,000 clients. You see what I'm saying? So you could say like, yeah, I teach boxing at Spotify, all these different places. What you don't know is I made like $300 doing it.
Yeah.
But I got that logo. I got the photo. You know, like I was in it.
Yeah, because
so that's how. You know.
Yeah, so that begot that, which begets this, and you know, you kind of
exactly. But here's the deal, too. See, sometimes you know you got to play chess, not checkers, right? Some people will turn down opportunities like that. They're like, I know my worth. I'm worth more than that, whatever. But it's like you don't got the experience yet. So then guess what? You get in one of those classes, you get set up. Now you got your routine down. You're good. So now when you do pitch that next client, you're a well-oiled machine because you got the reps in. So that's the thing about entrepreneurship is you got to get the reps in.
Okay. So now you boxing. You're training boxing for free for the youth. Is it for the youth?
Yeah. So I would be sprinting back to Newark by 4 p.m. to open the boxing gym. It was not sustainable. I was running around. I was like working 16-hour days, 18-hour days, exhausted.
Yeah. So now anybody that does something for the youth, my thought process is you're doing it for like with some kind of purpose and vision, some kind of mission, vision, and guiding principle that's going to be beneficial to the kids that's taking part in it, right? What was yours for teaching them boxing?
I think for me, I just got exposed to a different level of boxing at the Naval Academy. Not specifically in the ring, just in the fact that like you could be a boxer and be an officer and be a college graduate, you know, and go to like grad school and start a business and work in corporate America, et cetera. The reality of it is like the majority of kids in inner city boxing gyms, that's not their reality. You know, they're either in the streets, right? Or they go pro. And that's all they knew that was possible. And I didn't want that. I thought there was just so much more we could do. And so that was my motivation, was to show them like, an alternative reality of like what's possible. So like one of my mentees he's a professional now. His name's Keith Cologne. He's a professional boxer. He goes to Rutgers, Newark, right? And he was like Ironbound 101, patient zero. And him and I were talking back and forth today about building his business, you know? So he's asking me questions. He's got this idea for this short film he wants to do. And I told him like, hey, just record the trailer for it, you know, get some momentum going, stuff like that, right? So making that kind of normal.
Yeah, because now I'm a kind of bounce because you just brought something to my head. You talked about recording the trailer and putting it out, stuff like that, right? One thing that I did see with you is that you believe in crowdfunding. Like crowdfunding is one of the things that you utilize that even for the book, I think, Black Veteran Entrepreneur. What's some of the pros and cons of that? Well, first off, what made you gravitate toward that, or what made you embrace that more so? And then what's some of the pros and cons that you found with crowdfunding?
Well, I signed up for a program called the B School. It was like the book school. And that's just the system that they taught, right? So you paid $300. It was like $1,000 or something to join it. And you would crowdfund your book. And I was super nervous. Like the night before I hit send on that crowdfund, I was nervous about it because I was like, is anybody going to support this? And then like, if the crowdfund doesn't go through, I got to come out of pocket to pay for this. So I was super nervous, but we ended up crowdfunding the book within like 3 days. And I was like, oh, wow, like this is a thing. This is cool. But mainly it was that. And what I just really learned, this is why y'all see, everybody loves, networking. They love the term networking, and networking gets a bad rap. Don't even think of it as networking. Just think of it as community building. And so like in life, like you got to have people you can go through life with, right? And so, what I've done a good job of is just mobilizing a community, and they're genuinely interested in kind of the things that I'm doing and the projects that I'm working on. And so whether they come across as customers for some of my businesses, or, they want to, support the nonprofit, or vice versa, I go support them, like that's really what it's about. It's about like community, and having people supporting, lifting each other up, and just that's what I've been doing like over the last, 10 years.
Mm-hmm. You ever think about like your first day, what would you call your first official day with Ironbound?
My first official day, It was the day that the city of Newark, because I approached the city of Newark saying, hey, I want to build a free gym in the city. I just need a space.
Yeah.
I had a relationship with the head of recreation for the city of Newark. He took me to a location and he said, will this work? That was the day.
So that was the day.
Yeah.
So you just in the gym. How was the gym? Was it like well put together?
There was no gym. There was no gym. It was an abandoned space in the back of a leaky recreation center. Right? There was no boxing ring. There was no nothing. Right? Like I got a video of it. I'll send it to you. And we just got to work. But that was the day. That was when it became real. Like I'd always told people that I wanted to start a boxing gym, but the minute he, told me, will this work? Like that's the moment I became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you took it. You wasn't like, it wasn't no like, no, I'm holding out for something different. Like it was like, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna make this work. That's cool, man. So now what's next now? Like when do you start like what makes you feel like you want to start the podcast? When do you start? Is it anything you do before the podcast, between starting Ironbound and the podcast? Like where are we at in the journey?
So I started Ironbound Boxing in 2016. So it was like October 6th was when I got the thumbs up. Will this work? So I started the gym and I started working on the gym in October 6th. We launched the gym in February of 2017. That was when it was officially opened to the public. And then I didn't start podcasting. I launched Confessions of a Native Son in February of 2020, just before the pandemic. And at the time, right, like I had just started listening to podcasts from like an entrepreneur perspective, but I had this story I wanted to get out about my experience being in the Marines and just kind of how I viewed the world, whatever. And I had this idea for a book called Confessions of a Native Son, because I got my master's in American Studies from Rutgers, Newark. So I'm big on like James Baldwin, Malcolm X, all this other stuff. Richard Wright wrote a book called Native Son, which was a fiction novel. And James Baldwin wrote this book called Notes of a Native Son. And I had this vision for writing a book called Confessions of a Native Son, which brought in the veteran perspective on like race, culture, business. And then somewhere along the way, I was like, well, what if I made this a podcast? And just kind of got in my head. And so I start nurturing that idea probably summer of 2019, start connecting with some podcast groups in the city, start reading a bunch of books about it. And then I launched Native Son in February of 2020. And then the pandemic hit in March.
Yeah.
Okay. And businesses fell for primarily two reasons. Number one, no market need. And number two, they ran out of cash. So virtually overnight, there was no market need for boxing. We had to close the boxing academy. All my clients in the city no longer needed me to come on site. And so podcast kind of just became my outlet during, the pandemic. But pretty soon, early on, I started exploring different business ideas. And I had this idea in the back of my head about, what if I start a podcast agency? And I just start testing the idea, start putting bugs in people's ear. And then I started getting hired to produce podcasts. And so that's how I was able to get into podcasting and branding and content creation. So I just start producing podcasts for brands.
Yeah. And how long were you actively putting out episodes with Confessions of a Native Son?
I was most consistent with it during the pandemic. And I had a lot of people tuning in, especially after George Floyd happened. Because, I call that the day that America found out we were Black. And then a lot of my people and friends from the Naval Academy or classmates, whatever, this incident happened and they all wanted to talk to somebody, like to kind of, you remember all of a sudden you start getting phone calls from just people you ain't never talked to or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I would just be like, go listen to the podcast. So week over week, people were just tuning in to just kind of hear my perspective because they respected me because of my background. I'm a veteran. I'm a Naval Academy grad, et cetera, et cetera. And I think for that podcast, there was just like an arc. You know what I'm saying? Like there's an arc of certain things you want to get off your chest. And I think the culmination of like finally getting my book out, kind of I didn't go too deep in the Black Better Entrepreneur book, but like the podcast is pretty meaty. Like if all the episodes combined, whatever. And so part of me thinks I kind of ran that arc and I got it off, but I do think about sometimes revisiting it, bringing it back. But I just became an entrepreneur. It was just crazy because like I was already an entrepreneur, but then what happened was that podcast agency I started, it started to get more successful. And so now I was having less time to dedicate to the podcast. And then I got hired to do another podcast called The Transition, which was specifically focused on veteran entrepreneurship. And so that was the main revenue. That was a big revenue generator for me. So the Native Son just became a lot.
Mm-hmm. And now just we had a conversation off mic, right, about just podcasting and the state of it now when it comes to you and your perspective of, what it should be. And I'm interested in you sharing your thoughts actually on episode about that.
Yeah, I just thought podcasting is just this very, very powerful medium, particularly for people of color, right? You have an opportunity to put out whatever you want in the universe, education-wise, you know what I mean? All these different things. And I've just seen podcasting seem like it's gotten pettier and pettier over the years, just in terms of people putting people on blast online, And it's one thing to do it, like, let's say you got a group of friends, right? Put somebody on blast, but to go on the internet, and blast someone and going back and forth and tit for tat, like, I just think it's like tacky, And it's like, if you look at like some of the top like Tim Ferriss, right? Example, Tim Ferriss, he's talking about like human performance and yada, 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 and Jocko leadership and being your best self and yada, yada, yada. And then you got like Shannon Sharp up there talking to Cat Williams. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I just felt like we're missing the mark again. So you remember back in the day, people used to complain about BET because they're like, oh man, Black entertainment television, right? Like, why don't we have, why don't they not talk about business and they're talking about this? Now you have a platform, right? You can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Like you all talk about leadership and, y'all are creating space and having these great conversations. And it's just like, it just feels very low energy for some of the content that's getting produced now.
Yeah, it's crazy because, that's like what people gravitate towards, man. It's like, it's an uphill battle when you don't have that and when you got like Tyler Perry, right? And I don't mean to be offensive or nothing like that, but Tyler Perry could put out 20 projects that's all trash. You know what I mean? Yeah. But those 20 projects, they going to be number one on some streaming site for at least the week or the weekend or something like that. Just impact, like immediate impact off of that. Whereas if he puts out like, or if somebody else put out something, a substance like that matters, that like we could connect with in a different way, not saying that Tyler Perry work ain't substance. It's just for a lot of them, it's a longer climb. So a lot of people pivot to what's going to get. Now, here's the craziest part. A lot of people pivot to what's going to get ears and attention. And then they never, ever like divert the audience back to like a message. They kind of stick what's giving them numbers because people do the whole research in their fan base. Like, so they studying what people, like if PTSF like study what people react to on social media, we would be making one form of content every single time, but we just don't do
and
that.
It's a choice.
Yeah,
right? It's a choice. And you know how like you'll have an interview with someone and you're like, you know what? I don't really want to release it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing that's crazy about me, because like, that's the thing is, I think it's crazy about podcasting is like, and I'm going to use, I don't know what your thoughts on Shannon Sharp or whatever. But I shouldn't even do it. But just an idea, like somebody said something on a podcast, right? That you know is controversial, that you know is calling out somebody else. You have the decision or not, whether or not to release that podcast.
Yeah. Yep.
And you think about what happened with the whole kind of Kanye West situation when he went on Drink Champs and some others. They didn't have to release those podcasts.
Yeah.
You know? And so I just worry sometimes, like, again, like we don't have to blame BT and some of these other platforms anymore.
Nope.
You know, it's like, dude, like, and I believe that you get to choose what kind of energy you like to put out there. So like you see my social media, right? Like my little Instagram, right? Very, like I'm very cognizant of to have young kids follow me online, you know? So I'm very intentional about like what I want to share and the energy I want to put out and whatever. So like I'll share books and stuff like that. You'd be surprised how many people will text me like, oh, is that a good book? Should I read or whatever? I think I shared the Peter Attia book and you hit me and you're like, well, that's a good book. Like, that's the kind of stuff I like, you know, in terms of like, what can we grow together? And I'm not trying to be all kumbaya, but I just see so many podcasters that are just petty, just want to just blast people. And I just think it's tacky.
Yeah,
I think it's missing the mark on the medium.
Yeah. And it's the viral bug, man. And it's cyclic. It's like the audience wants it, but then the audience will say they don't want it. And then like, you don't want to do it, but then you got to go. It's like that, like magician that like didn't perform this hit trick 25 years ago. It just still got to keep going out, you know, to the crowd. It's just
think about podcasting in like 2015. Podcast was something you put in your ear when you want to better yourself.
Yes,
you know?
Yeah, it's fresh. It was fresh. It was a fresh.
It was fresh. People were like talking business and yada yada, and it's evolved, right? It's turning into just mainstream television now. You know?
Yeah, it's a million of them. Hey, so question for you: what's Thrive?
So Thrive was an entrepreneur program we started during the pandemic because our gym was closed. And we wanted to have something to engage the kids. And I felt like, let's teach them entrepreneurship. So we spun up a program called Thrive. Alana and I did it together. Well, actually, me and my virtual assistant did it at first. And then I was able to bring Alana into it. And we've done a couple cohorts where we've trained kids on how to start a business. And we've given them grants anywhere between $500 to $2,000.
What's the Courage Academy?
The Courage Academy is the vision for Ironbound Boxing 2.0. So we have a gym now, and I have a vision for a gym that is a boxing gym and a co-working space together under one roof.
And then Hoover Institute, what's that?
Yeah, you coming with all you do the research, you know.
Well, Hoover was a thing that I saw you like get into. That was back when we were recording with you, like a little after or something. You got in Hoover, so then I was like, oh man, he's busy.
The Hoover Institution is a think tank that promotes ideas that define a free society. So it's a very conservative think tank, and it's at Stanford University. And they have what's called a veteran fellowship program. So for everyone listening, you can apply to this veteran fellowship program, like once you transition out, et cetera. Or if you're a reservist, that's fine too. And essentially, like if you have an idea that you're working on that's going to make America or the world a better place in some capacity, then Hoover wants to support you with that. And so they want you to come under the Stanford umbrella at the Hoover Institution for like a period of 12 months. They're going to give you a stipend. They're going to cover your travel, your lodging. You're also going to do an international trip. We went to Tbilisi, Georgia, the Republic of Georgia. And I love Georgia now because of that trip, because it exposed me to another country like that. And I love traveling. And so I've got a cohort of 10. They do a cohort of 10 fellows every year. And we also do a big event in DC once a year where all the different cohorts come together and like fellowship and do some stuff together. So I was part of the inaugural cohort. We're on cohort number 4 now. And it's surreal to go from 1 to 4 in such a short amount of time. So now I go to this event. There's like 40 people in there. I don't even know everybody, but but I'm considered an OG because like I was part of that inaugural cohort.
Yeah, man. Next time you come to DC, man, hit me up. Let me know, man.
I will. I didn't know you were in DC for some reason.
Yeah, I'm in the area. I want to kind of finish the conversation talking about the book, but before I go there, you said you just came back from Nepal.
Yeah.
And what did you gain from that visit?
I have this conversation like every day because everybody's so. First of all, I'm wearing a hat that says Sherpa, right? Mm-hmm. It's a brand named after the ethnic people. They're called Sherpas. They're the ones that lead the trips in the mountains and stuff like that, right? The big thing for me was one, it's a hell of a thing to like travel halfway around the country, halfway around the world, spend 3 days acclimating, get helicoptered into the mountains, spend 9 days trekking in the mountains, right? To go to this place. And it was base camp. We didn't climb up Everest. We just went to base camp. But it felt good to do something hard and physical like that again. Something that kind of pushed you a little bit and challenged you, and you got to see it come to fruition. So I want more of that in my life, right? Mm-hmm. Second thing was the Sherpa people, right? So these are the native people, getting to experience them and their culture, and it's just amazing. The travel itself, just the beauty of just kind of looking around, and just seeing it's like some of the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen. Like the first 2 days of like being in the mountains, I was like, this is it. And just the realization of like, your current reality is not somebody else's reality. Mm-hmm. So like in Nepal, like when we were starting our day, y'all were going to bed in the States, Mm-hmm. And so just imagine like right now, somebody's on a beach somewhere, when you're working, grinding away on like Tuesday afternoon at like 2:00, trying to get all your work done. Just the idea that somebody could be on the beach somewhere in another part of the world. And so that was just real enlightening.
Mm-hmm. Hey, now as far as the book, Black Veteran Entrepreneur, did I miss the audiobook? I thought y'all were recording the audiobook. What happened?
We did. There is an audiobook. It's available on Audible. I just have not done the best job of promoting the book since writing it. I think part of that was the book itself. When you write a book, you be so over it. You're over it, right? And what we weren't banking on was the audiobook was going to be a whole other lift. And so it's just like, it was a big project to get done. And so when we finally got it done, we were just thankful it was released. But like, we haven't done the best job of like marketing and promoting it. But like, I did put a lot of time. We did put a lot of time into that book. And I know so much, like it's a great book. Like if you're a veteran entrepreneur, whether you're black, brown, purple, yellow, it don't matter. Read the book. And the reason I called it Black Veteran Entrepreneur though, was because I just didn't see a lot of us represented. So I did want to write a book that, there's this term called agency. Okay. Sometimes it's just nice to be seen. Mm-hmm. It's just nice to be seen. And I just did not feel seen for a long time as an entrepreneur. So I just created my own space. And so that's why I wrote kind of the book. And I wanted other people to be seen, But I want to profile stories of successful Black veteran entrepreneurs that are starting their businesses. I want to share my kind of frameworks and things I learned over the years. And so that's what motivated us to write the book.
Yeah. And people, I wish people could understand. I don't know if they don't or they just don't want to, but sometimes your culture matters when you consume these things. Like I was reading a bunch of books about being a dad, right? When my daughter was pregnant. When my wife was pregnant with my daughter. And so like they were informative. It was some good stuff. But one of the ones I connected with the most, it was a Black dad book, right? I felt at home listening. It was things that I just like, the verbiage, it was an audiobook, right? The narrators, their voices, the verbiage, the things they said, it was like related to things that I've experienced when I grew up in my house, things my dad might have said, things my grandfather might have said. It was just different than the very informative and very, really good books that I read that wasn't called like Black Dad books. But the Black Dad book was special for me too. And it still would have been special for somebody that's not Black as well. But it had some connecting points that connected directly to me being a Black father to be. And I wish people understood that more than got offended by the fact that Black is in the title of something. you know?
Yeah, because it's not in the title more often than it is. You know, like the thing is, there's just not. Dude, I got books. Y'all can't see. I got books for days. Books for days, right? All I do is read business books, right? There's just not a lot of Black business authors. And if there is one, I have the book. I buy the books. Anytime I come across a book on business written by a Black author, I snatch it up.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just that, like, for whatever reason, we're just not represented. And there's a whole research out there. You can go look about minorities in the publishing industry, particularly Black and brown folks. You know, there was when you think about like venture capital and how a lot of startups get their businesses off the ground, less than 1% goes to like African American. This is just the reality of the world that we're kind of in. And I just wanted to say, like, I see y'all. You know, like I see you out there trying to make this thing work. And I just want to write something for you, you know? And it's funny because I wrote the book and, you know, people will be like, I don't think this book is for me. Not Black people, but just like other, you know, non-Black founders. But like I have to read books all the time that ain't a Black, brown spec, you know what I mean?
Right,
and I have to just do it all the time. And it's just the norm for them. So.
Yeah. And I always connected that with like pop culture. Like when I would grow up and people be like, oh, you never saw like Animal House, or, you know, like it'd be like all these like movies that just don't have like a Black character in it at all. But it's like, you know, I'm like, hey, have you ever saw like Love and Basketball? Or like, no,
have you seen ATL? You know, like, have you seen these movies? It's like a whole nother culture.
Yep. But they like, no, like, I can't believe you never watched this. You never saw this, you know, so I always connected with that. Like, you know, and for me being understanding of our pop culture, I did watch all that shit. I watched Apocalypse Now and I watched Godfather 2. I watched anything that we could talk about that's like a pop culture kind of classic, right?
Absolutely.
But then I also watched our shit, Paid in Full. I watched Belly. You know.
Did you watch The Last Dragon?
I gotta watch it again. I gotta watch it.
Get off the bike, y'all.
Yeah. I'm so young.
Bruce Leroy?
I know all about it. I know all the like break-in and all them like 80s joints. I know all about them, but I had to sit. I've seen it, but it's like never in the story. Like I gotta sit and watch it again because I don't remember it the way that I remember like movies from my time, which were like Paid in Full, Belly, you know, stuff like that was more of my time. Like I just recently rewatched The Wiz. Very recently, we was rewatching The Wiz. I'm like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? So I got to go back and watch The Last Dragon again. You know what I mean?
Man.
I know it's a classic and I know it's one of those staples, and it's especially like you probably lose your black card if you know.
Yeah, I was looking at you funny when you see The Last Dragon. But then you brought it back when you said The Wiz.
Yeah. I just rewatched that, man. But you know, it's a lot of those that I gotta go back and sit with. And my wife, she not really that, like, she don't really watch old movies like that. So sometimes I gotta do it. She like her attention span can't. She don't watch like foreign movies with subtitles unless she dub them. And I don't really like dubs like that. And then she don't watch old movies that much. And I be getting frustrated because I wanted to watch Apocalypto. Like the Mel Gibson joint. I'm like, yo, I want you to watch this movie, but it's dubbed. It's not in English. And she, you know, she just have a hard time.
I love the 80s, 90s movies. That's my world. All day, every day. Yeah. Anytime I can watch a movie, I prefer to watch something from back because it's just so good. The nostalgia feeling you see, even just, you know, it's just a different time, right? Like you just appreciate it, you know?
Yeah. And it's crazy because so 80s, I was young, right? So 80s wasn't my time. So 90s is my connective tissue kind of when it comes to that stuff, right? But whenever I go, so 80s, I used to hate 80s music, right? Just to kind of get I used to hate 80s music. Now I love 80s music. You know, I'm a big music person. I made music my whole life. That's what I did before anything else. Like I made music. So I used to like, so I would dig in the crates. So it was hip hop digging in the crates. It was KRS. It was Slick Rick. It was like all the old EPMD, DOS Effects, like all the old stuff, right? And then but when I would dig back to the 80s music, I just wouldn't connect. It was a lot of disco, a lot of funk, a lot of sounds that I just wasn't used to because my introduction was like grimy hip hop, right? Like Mobb Deep sound, that sound. So it was hard to connect with that sound. But now with like the way music is now, in the last like 10 years, when you got a lot of that club sounding and a lot of techno stuff like that, electronic music, I find it a lot easier now to connect back with 80s music, which is prevalent in 80s movies. You know what I mean? Like Teen Wolf and all that. Like all of them, like, of course I watched The Breakfast Club. Of course I saw 16 Candles. You know what I mean? Like that. So yeah, 80s was a time, man. So I'm still kind of getting into, my 80s bag.
Yeah, Flashdance. Love it.
Yeah, Flashdance. Was Ghost in the 80s or Ghost was in the 90s?
I think early 90s was Ghost.
Yeah. Hey, so while we talking about all this stuff, I need a book recommendation from you outside of Black Veteran Entrepreneur.
The Alchemist.
Okay.
Does it need to be a business book or just a book in general?
It could be whatever.
My most recommended book is just The Alchemist. I love The Alchemist.
Yeah.
It's by Paul Coelho. It's a novel, and it's a fiction novel, but it tells the story of a young man who goes on this journey for his personal treasure. And it's kind of like a parable to kind of life, and just the way it's very well written, and you just see yourself reflected a lot in that.
Mm-hmm.
Another good book, The Spook Who Sat by the Door by Sam Greenlee.
Yeah. I saw the movie.
That might go over some of y'all's heads.
Yeah.
But that is like one of my top 5 books of all time, right? Spook Who Sat by the Door. We saw the premiere of the movie. They did a premiere reimagined version of the movie in New York, like remastered, because you couldn't find a movie anywhere. It was just whatever. Mm-hmm. But I found it on YouTube back in the day, so I was already like in the game. I read the book like 5 times. But Spook Who Sat by the Door. I love that book. I love that movie. It's the truth.
You got any new books coming?
That I'm working on?
Mm-hmm.
I got a couple ideas in the works. I have an idea called like Nights and Weekends. Just kind of teach you how to like basically bootstrap a side hustle and kind of how to think of it. But also, you just also want to make sure that like, I'm starting to realize that the key with writing, like in Black Veteran Entrepreneur, one of the things I've heard consistently is that like everybody really loved that first chapter of like me kind of telling my story and yada. It was super interesting.
Was good.
The business stuff was good, but like they were generally interested in like that other aspect, because like anybody can write the business stuff, but like you got to find the sweet spot that encompasses like your story and and everything kind of together. And so with that in mind, because even I have a newsletter called The Slap that I write, and it's about, brand building, how to build a brand that slaps. And some of the best, same thing. People respond to, people respond the most when I include personal stuff, So like before I went to base camp, I wrote about going to base camp, and they loved it. So, just trying to find my kind of writing voice. And so I need to build a daily writing habit to make that happen.
Yeah, it's a book. It's called Building a Story Brand.
Of course. Read it like 5 times.
Yeah. I gained a lot from that book, because it's like everything that, even an Amazon review is a story. Like somebody like, hey, originally I wasn't going to get this thing, and then my husband told me. It's like, everybody kind of speaks in that kind of story form. So one of my last questions I got for you is this. How many businesses do you have right now?
That's a good question. So 3.
Mm-hmm.
I have the boxing gym that I started that's set up as a nonprofit. And then I have the Misfits, which is the design studio. And then I do business coaching. But I don't really have a separate company set up for business coaching. I just do it through my S Corp. So the way I have it set up is it's like Ironbound Ventures. And then underneath Ironbound Ventures is the Misfits. And then I just build my coaching through it as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever take a break?
Yeah, all the time. I was gone for like 3 weeks in Nepal.
Mm-hmm. And so that was a break. That was just a vacation, a break. That was
vacation.
Relaxing.
Yeah, I do one big one every year. I'd like to travel somewhere. The year before I went to Peru, we trekked up to Machu Picchu. Right. And then I told you I went to Georgia with Hoover. I travel a lot. So I'm always kind of traveling. And then like Thursday, self-care Thursday. So like I take off on Thursday for the most part. Like I go to this bathhouse in New York City. I'll do like sauna, cold plunge. I'll meet with my coach. I might have like one coaching call, but I'll get a haircut, beard trim, You know, if I need to get my nails done or something, I'll do it on that day. But yeah, I'm all about sustainability for sure.
Okay, that's what's up.
Not getting burned out.
You cook?
No, that's my kryptonite right now. Because remember what we said about energy, right? Like, there's just so much other things I want to do right now other than like cook in the kitchen. You know, like that's like an hour and a half, you know. So if you can figure out a way to make it happen. Yeah, but that's something I've been thinking about though. Like, it would be cool to cook like Vietnam food and all these other different things. But just everything feels like a lift. Remember what we talked about before? Yeah. Like the older you get, you realize that time is the real currency.
It's way faster. Like the older you get, the faster it moves. Like,
yeah. That's why I was talking to my coaching client. I'm like, look, the time is going to take to go track this invoice down. If he don't want to pay you, we got to deal with lawyers. You're not getting that time back. Let's just focus that time and energy elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, so you know that first question that I asked you.
Yeah. What's my confession?
No, it was I think it was the question that you wanted me to repeat. I'm gonna go back to it, and that's how we gonna kind of close this conversation. It was, do you believe in purpose, and what do you think your purpose is?
Yeah, I absolutely do believe in purpose. I think purposes can shift. I think there's definitely seasons. And I think my purpose is to just kind of help people right now, help people through whatever it is I'm working on. Everything I do is like a way to help people. Business is about helping people. So I think my purpose is really just to keep exploring my curiosity, and it's going to lead me to where I need to go.
Mm-hmm. Hey, man, it's so much that we didn't talk about. like it's so many corners that we didn't get into, so many cracks that we didn't kind of open up. But this, in my thought process, this is a really good conversation.
Always, man. I'm always down to chop it up with y'all. I appreciate you. I'm glad to see, you leveling up. Y'all got different co-hosts, so you're growing. You got the admin. So it's good, man. It's really dope. I gave y'all a shout out yesterday. I was at an event, right? And I was telling them just kind of like the platform that y'all have and how y'all are reaching so many enlisted service members and stuff, giving them a voice. I think it's really dope.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, man. And it's good to see you doing everything you're doing too, man. So I'll keep watching. I always tell people to keep us honest. Keep us honest. We go crazy sometimes. So keep us honest. And we definitely appreciate you, man. And I can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah, for sure. And then definitely I'll let you know next time I'm in DC. We can link up.
And if anybody looking for you, where can they find you, man?
Just go to you can just shoot me an email, mike@weareironbound.com. And you can also follow me on social, LinkedIn, Iron Mike Steadman, Instagram, Iron Mike Steadman. Easy day.
All right, y'all. Damon ain't here, so it ain't no Mississippi stand up,
Yeah.
What up?